The death of 4-year-old Megan Khung in February 2020 was a tragedy, marked not only by cruelty, but also by systemic failure. She died after enduring more than a year of escalating abuse at the hands of her mother Fu Liping and Fu's boyfriend, Wang Shixiang. In a horrifying postscript to her suffering, her body was burned in a barrel in an attempt to cover up the crime. In 2025, Fu and Wang were convicted, Fu receiving 19 years in prison and Wang 30 years with 17 strokes of the cane. But despite the conclusion of the criminal case, scrutiny continues to grow over how so many warning signs were overlooked and why no one stepped in time to save Megan. At the heart of the conversation is the role played by the Early Childhood Development Agency, which now finds itself on the defensive. ECDA is the regulatory authority for preschools in Singapore. When visible injuries were observed on Megan by her teachers at Healthy Start Child Development Centre in March 2019, the school, run by Beyond Social Services, submitted a report to ECDA the following month. Yet ECDA said it had no reason to suspect child abuse. According to the Ministry of Social and Family Development, the report did not fully describe the severity of Megan's injuries. The school reported that Megan appeared happy, had no further injuries, and had been attending preschool daily. In ECDA's view, this was insufficient to flag serious danger. Based on the information presented by HSCDC, there was no reason for ECDA to suspect child abuse, MSF stated. This response has been viewed by many observers as an attempt to deflect accountability. Critics argue that a regulatory body like ECDA cannot rely solely on subjective reports from childcare centres when a child presents visible injuries, particularly in a child from a known vulnerable background. If ECDA had questioned or followed up more rigorously on the injuries Megan suffered, or if it had escalated the matter to the Child Protective Service, Megan might still be alive. On 9 April, the Singapore Children's Society issued a statement condemning the incident as a collective failure of the child protection system. The charity acknowledged that while some educators had initially raised concerns, the system lacked sufficient response mechanisms to address the seriousness of the situation. It called for stronger safeguards in preschools, including mandatory child protection training and the appointment of dedicated child safety officers. Megan's case showed several serious problems in how her situation was handled. In March 2019, a social worker saw bruises on her but decided they were due to excessive discipline, not ongoing abuse. This reduced the chances of stronger action being taken. Megan was then placed under her grandmother's care through a temporary care plan, but without any court orders or strict rules, her mother was able to take her back in September 2019. Later, when Megan was withdrawn from her preschool, the case was reported to a child protection specialist centre, which chose to keep monitoring the situation through the grandmother instead of escalating it. Police only got involved in January 2020, when the grandmother finally agreed to make a report. Until then, social workers had no direct contact with Megan and had to rely on updates from her family, even though they couldn't be sure she was safe. These failings point to a troubling reliance on cooperative parenting and informal safeguards, even in cases with prior abuse indicators. The criminal sentencing of Fu and Wang also raised widespread concern. Many Singaporeans expressed disbelief that Fu received 19 years and Wang 30 years with caning, despite the extreme, prolonged, and sadistic nature of the abuse. Numerous netizens compared the case to other high-profile sentences, particularly those involving drug trafficking, where offenders often receive life imprisonment or the death penalty. The contrast raised questions about proportionality in Singapore's justice system. Public sentiment was perhaps best captured in comments that described the punishment as too light, arguing that if the law defines deliberate, fatal abuse of a child as anything less than murder, the law must be reviewed. Megan's story has triggered a wave of public debate, not just about her abusers, but about the ecosystem around her that failed to protect her. Megan's case has sparked public concern over who should have done more to protect her. Many questioned why the ECDA relied only on preschool reports, without verifying the situation independently, and why the Ministry of Social and Family Development didn't step in more firmly. Some also asked whether Beyond Social Services, while following proper procedures, could have acted more urgently or alerted the police earlier. Megan's grandmother, who was her main caregiver at one point, is also being questioned for not speaking up sooner, even if she feared family conflict. Lastly, Megan's father, Khung Nan, only reported her missing in July 2020, raising questions about his involvement in ensuring her safety. These questions reflect a complex web of ethical, procedural, and emotional dimensions, but all point back to a central issue. Megan was not protected. Megan's death also spotlights a deeper cultural hesitation to interfere in family matters, which can delay necessary legal action. Both MSF and Beyond Social Services noted that a lack of access to Megan contributed to the inability to intervene. However, as Megan's case shows, relying on parental cooperation in high-risk situations may itself be a flawed assumption. Social workers often lack enforcement power unless a formal report has been filed or unless the situation meets a high threshold of immediate threat. This can leave children like Megan, who are under informal watch, vulnerable to slipping through the cracks. In 2021, the Ministry of Social and Family Development introduced new rules in response to Megan's case. Preschools are now required to report any signs of abuse to the ECDA within 24 hours. If a child shows signs of serious harm, like sexual abuse or physical injury, schools must call the National Anti-Violence and Sexual Harassment Helpline within 2 hours. Staff must also draw and document any visible injuries, not just describe them in writing. In addition, if a child with known safety concerns is suddenly withdrawn from school without a clear reason, it must be reported immediately. ECDA must also now cross-check with CPS or CPSC to verify if cases have been raised, rather than accepting preschool claims at face value. While these measures are promising, experts and the public alike stress that implementation must be rigorous and consistently monitored. MSF acknowledged that Megan is not the only child to have died while under the radar of child protection systems. At least 8 other children have died in similar circumstances over the last decade. One such case is that of Umaisia, a toddler who was abused and killed by her parents in 2014, then hidden in a pot for years. The parents evaded detection by lying about her whereabouts, underscoring another painful truth. When abusers obstruct access, the system can falter. To address this, a 2020 policy now mandates that agencies unable to locate a child must alert the police. This move toward site and safety verification is a critical step forward. Many Singaporeans are calling for reforms to better protect children like Megan. One key suggestion is to give social service professionals stronger legal powers to act without needing parental consent in high-risk situations. There are also calls for regular, independent audits of child welfare agencies like ECDA to ensure proper handling of vulnerable cases. Some believe that sentencing laws for child abuse and homicide should be reviewed to better reflect society's expectations and to serve as stronger deterrents. Additionally, there is a push for more public education on recognizing abuse and encouraging community members to report concerns, with the hope that a shared sense of responsibility could help save lives. In the end, Megan Khung's story is not just about parental cruelty, it is about a society's collective failure to protect its most vulnerable. While no retrospective action can undo her suffering, her death must catalyze lasting change. As MSF stated, every case of abuse is one too many. But for Megan and others like her, that phrase is no longer a warning. It is a painful epitaph.